Welcome to Midnight Delight, where nightmares come to play. Tonight we take you deep into the shadows, where fear lurks and the unknown waits for its next victim. These are not just stories, they're warnings. From haunted houses that crave trick-or-treaters, to scarecrows that hunger for more than just the harvest. Sit back, but don't get too comfortable, because these tales will have you questioning the shadows around you. Ready? It's time to enter the world of Halloween horrors. I still don't know why we decided to sneak into that pumpkin patch. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was just that dumb teenage need to prove we weren't scared of anything. But looking back, it was the worst decision we ever made. It was the night before Halloween. Me, Josh, Rachel, and Alex were hanging out, talking about what we should do for the night. There wasn't much going on in our small town except for the pumpkin patch on the outskirts. Every year families would go there to pick pumpkins, but after sunset the place had a reputation for being weird. People said the scarecrows moved when no one was watching, that strange sounds echoed through the fields, and that no one should ever go there after dark. Of course we didn't believe any of it. So when Josh suggested we sneak in, we all agreed, laughing at the idea of being scared by a few old scarecrows. We hopped in Alex's truck and made the short drive out to the patch. The moon was high, casting a pale light over the fields as we pulled up to the entrance. There was no one around, obviously. It was after 10 and the place was closed. The wooden fence surrounding the field was old and worn, easy to climb over, and we didn't waste any time hopping over it. The moment my feet hit the dirt on the other side, I felt off. The air was cold, colder than it should have been for October, and the pumpkins, lined up in neat rows, seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. But I pushed the weird feeling aside. It was just a pumpkin patch, nothing to be scared of, right? Josh, being the idiot he is, started joking around, running ahead and pretending to be a scarecrow, arms stretched out, stumbling around. "Ooh, the scarecrows are gonna get you," he called out, laughing. "Shut up, Josh," Rachel groaned, rolling her eyes, but she was smiling, so none of us thought anything was wrong. We walked deeper into the patch, the moonlight barely cutting through the tall corn stalks that lined the outer edges. The scarecrows were spaced out, one every 10 or 15 feet, each of them standing in that creepy, lifeless way. Their straw-stuffed bodies were slumped over, their heads tilted to one side with burlap sacks for faces. The only thing that made them seem different was the fact that their eyes were black. Completely black. No buttons, no fabric, just dark, empty holes. "I dare you to touch one," Alex said to Josh, grinning. "Go on if you're not scared." Josh, always the one to take a dare, walked right up to the closest scarecrow and reached out. As soon as his hand touched the straw arm, I swear to God, the thing twitched. Just a little, like a muscle spasm, but enough to make Josh pull back. "Did you see that?" Josh said, his voice a little bit shaky, and he wasn't smiling anymore. "Dude, it's just your imagination," I said, though I wasn't sure either. We all stared at the scarecrow for a few seconds, but it didn't move again. Finally, Rachel broke the tension. "Okay, enough playing around. Let's go deeper and see if there's anything actually worth sneaking in for." We kept walking, winding our way through the field. The deeper we went, the taller the scarecrows seemed to get. Their shadows stretched long across the ground, and I couldn't shake the feeling that their black eyes were following us. That's when it started. At first, it was just small things. A rustling sound behind us, like something was moving through the corn. A faint whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. But then we heard it. Footsteps. Not ours. Not animals. Something heavy, slow, and deliberate. We all stopped, frozen in place, listening. The footsteps were coming closer. Rachel grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "What is that?" she whispered. Josh tried to play it off, but I could see he was nervous too. "Probably just the wind," he said, even though he didn't sound convinced. Suddenly, Alex pointed. "Look!" We turned and my heart nearly stopped. One of the scarecrows, the one Josh had touched, it was no longer slumped over. It was standing straight, its head tilted up slightly, like it was looking right at us. The empty black holes where its eyes should have been seemed deeper now. Darker. Almost alive. "We need to go," Rachel said, her voice barely a whisper. But Josh shook his head. "No way, we're not scared of some stupid scarecrows." But before any of us could argue, he started walking toward it, determined to prove he wasn't scared. But as he got closer, the scarecrow moved. It wasn't a slow, creaky movement. It jerked, like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. Its head snapped to the side, its arms raising, fingers made of straws curling into claws. That's when we ran. We didn't stop to think, didn't stop to argue. We just took off, sprinting through the rows of pumpkins. The sounds of our feet pounding against the dirt mixed with the eerie rustling of corn and footsteps. The scarecrows weren't just standing still anymore. I didn't have to look back to know they were coming after us. "Keep going!" I shouted, breathless as we ran deeper into the field. But no matter how far we ran, the scarecrows were always right behind us, their twisted burlap faces getting closer and closer. We made it to a clearing, panting, desperate to catch our breath. For a moment, I thought we'd lost them. But then I saw the pumpkins. They weren't normal pumpkins. They were wrong. The orange skin was mottled, almost rotting, and the faces carved into them seemed to twist and shift like they were alive. I could see their eyes glowing faintly, the same dark black as the scarecrow's eyes. "What the hell is this?" said Alex. But before we could answer, one of the pumpkins started to move. It wobbled, the carved mouth stretching into a grin far too wide for its face. Then it rolled towards us, slowly at first, but picking up speed like something was controlling it. "Run!" Rachel screamed, but it was too late. The pumpkin rolled straight at Josh, slamming into his legs. He went down hard, and before any of us could help, the pumpkin latched onto him. Its carved face opened wider, and I swear I saw something. Something like sharp teeth inside. It bit into his leg, and Josh screamed in agony. "Help me!" he cried, thrashing as the pumpkin gnawed at him, its jagged teeth sinking deeper into his skin. We tried. We really did, but as we reached out to pull him free, the scarecrows appeared, moving faster now, their straw-filled limbs jerking and twitching as they closed in on us. One grabbed Alex, pulling him back by his shirt. Another went for Rachel, its straw fingers wrapping around her throat, squeezing tight. I tried to fight them off, but they were too strong, too relentless. The scarecrow holding Alex yanked him to the ground, its straw fingers clawing at his skin, leaving deep bloody scratches. The one choking Rachel lifted her off the ground, her legs kicking as she gasped for air. I don't know how I managed to break free, but I did. I ran, leaving them behind, their screams echoing through the field as the scarecrows and the pumpkins tore into them. My legs burned, my lungs felt like they were on fire, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I just ran, hoping, praying that I could find a way out. But no matter how far I went, the field never seemed to end. The rows of pumpkins stretched on forever. The scarecrows watching, waiting. And then I saw it. The exit, the wooden fence we climbed over, just a few feet ahead. I sprinted towards it, my heart pounding in my chest. But just as I reached it, something grabbed my ankle. I looked down and one of the pumpkins had latched onto me, its mouth stretching wide, revealing these sharp, jagged teeth. I tried to kick it off, but it wouldn't let go. And the scarecrows were closing in, their black eyes growing in the moonlight, their straw fingers reaching for me. I knew then that I wasn't getting out. No one ever gets out. If you're reading this, don't go to the pumpkin patch. Don't sneak in. Don't think it's just some stupid urban legend. Because the scarecrows, they're waiting. And they'll never let you leave. I've lived in this town my whole life. And every year, right around Halloween, there's always one name on everyone's lips. The Cromwell House. It sits at the end of Maple Street, an old, crumbling mansion no one dares to go near. The house has been abandoned for as long as anyone can remember, and if you ask the older folks, they'll tell you a chilling story. The legend goes like this. Every year on Halloween night, one kid who goes trick-or-treating never comes back. No one ever sees them again, and they all have one thing in common. They all visited the Cromwell House. Of course, people try to explain it away. Maybe the kids ran away. Maybe something bad happened somewhere else. But the stories are too strange, too creepy. Every year someone disappears, and every year the Cromwell House stands silent and empty. This Halloween, me and my friends, Tommy, Sarah, and Ben, decided to put the legend to the test. We were sick of hearing the whispers, tired of being told to stay away from the house. We were going to see for ourselves if the Cromwell House was really as dangerous as everyone had said. It was late in the evening when we finally worked up the courage to head there. We'd been trick-or-treating around town, collecting candy, all the while talking ourselves into it. When we reached the end of Maple Street, there it was, looming over us like a shadow. The house looked worse than I expected. The windows were shattered, the roof sagging, and the wooden boards creaking even from a distance. The front yard was overgrown with weeds, and the path leading up to the door was cracked and faded. But the worst part was the front door. It was wide open, like it had been waiting for us. "No way," Sarah whispered, gripping her candy bag tightly. "It's just a story, right?" Tommy, always the brave one, puffed out his chest. "It's just an old house, come on, we're going in." Ben, he looked uneasy, glancing over his shoulder as if someone might see us. Maybe we shouldn't. What if the stories are true? I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to bail, to run back home and forget about this stupid idea. But another part of me, the part that didn't want to look like a coward, nodded in agreement with Tommy. "We'll be in and out," I said. "Just a quick look, and we can just say we did it." We stepped onto the porch, the gravel crunching under our shoes, the air around us growing colder the closer we got to the house. I kept telling myself it was just the nerves, that there was nothing to be scared of. But every instinct in my body was screaming to turn back. The door groaned as Tommy pushed it open wider, and the four of us stepped into the entryway. Inside the house was pitch black, the smell of mold and dust thick in the air, the only light coming from our flashlights. See? Nothing here, Tommy said, though his voice didn't sound as confident anymore. Let's check upstairs. We moved through the hallway, stepping over broken furniture and piles of rubble. Every step echoed through the empty house, making it sound like someone or something was following right behind us. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. As we reached the stairs, Sarah tugged on my sleeve. Did you hear that? I stopped and listened, but all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing. Hear what? Shh, she hissed. We all stood still, listening. At first there was nothing, just the creaks of the house settling. But then, I heard it too. A faint sound, like the soft thud of footsteps coming from upstairs. We looked at each other, our eyes wide. Maybe it's just the wind, Tommy said. But I could hear it in his voice. He was starting to get scared. There's no wind, Ben whispered. It's coming from up there. Tommy, stubborn as ever, took the first step up the staircase. The wooden boards groaned under his weight, but he kept going. Sarah and I followed close behind, with Ben bringing up the rear. My heart was racing, each step feeling heavier than the last. When we reached the top, the hallway stretched out before us, lined with old, broken doors. The footsteps had stopped, but the air up there felt thick, almost suffocating, and that feeling of being watched was just growing stronger each second we were there. Tommy led us down the hallway, stopping at the last door on the right. It was closed, unlike the others, and something about it seemed wrong. The wood was darker, almost wet-looking, and there was a faint, sour smell coming from behind it. Let's check this one, Tommy said, reaching for the doorknob. Wait, Sarah whispered, grabbing his arm. Maybe we shouldn't. Tommy shook her off, giving her a defiant look. What's the matter? Scared? Before anyone could stop him, he turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room inside was different from the rest of the house. It wasn't empty. The floor was covered in old, rotting candy wrappers, and in the center of the room was a massive cracked bowl, overflowing with half-eaten pieces of candy. But that wasn't what made my stomach drop. Lying around the bowl in a circle were piles of clothes. Kids' clothes. Tattered costumes, ripped sneakers, faded jackets, all of them looking like they had been there for years. And among the clothes, scattered on the floor, were old, dusty trick-or-treat bags. My blood ran cold and I got this terrible feeling. What the hell is this? Ben whispered, his voice trembling. But before anyone could answer, the door behind us slammed shut. We all jumped, spinning around to face it. Tommy rushed to the door, pulling at the knob, but it wouldn't budge. We're locked in, he shouted, yanking harder. Then the sound started again. The footsteps. Only this time they were louder, faster, and they were coming from inside the walls. Get us out of here, Sarah screamed, pounding on the door. The walls around us creaked and groaned, the footsteps growing closer until they were right there, right behind the cracked wallpaper. And then, something else. A low growl like the house itself was alive. Tommy kept pulling at the door, but it was no use. The walls were closing in, the growling growing louder, like something was pushing its way out. I backed away, my flashlight flickering, and that's when I saw it. The walls were moving. The wallpaper bubbled and stretched, like something was crawling beneath the surface. And then, with a sickening rip, The wall tore open, and a long, twisted hand made of wood and plaster, reached out. "Oh my God," Ben whispered, his face pale as a ghost. The hand grabbed at the air, and more began to tear through the walls, reaching for us. The room was alive, the walls breathing, the floorboards shifting beneath our feet. "We have to get out of here," I shouted, running to the window. But when I looked outside, there was nothing. No yard, no street, just darkness. The house had swallowed us whole. Tommy finally managed to kick the door open, and we ran. We ran down the hallway, the hands reaching from the walls, the growling chasing us. The house groaned and shook like it was waking up, hungry for more. As we reached the stairs, the floor split open, and Ben was the first to fall. He screamed as the floorboards gave away, and he disappeared into the darkness below, the house swallowing him up. "Ben!" Sarah cried, but there was nothing we could do. He was gone. We kept running down the stairs, through the hallway, the house twisting and turning around us. It was alive, shifting, blocking every exit. No matter which way we turned, the house kept changing, trapping us inside. As I looked at Sarah, she looked terrified, with tears coming down her face, like she had given up or lost hope. But Tommy wasn't giving up. He grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the front door. "Come on, we'll break it down." We reached the door, but as Tommy raised his foot to kick it, the door opened on its own. Not wide, just a crack. Just enough to make us freeze. Through the small opening, I could see the dark night outside, the street, the safety of the world beyond. "Go!" Tommy shouted, shoving me forward. I ran, Sarah right behind me. But as soon as I reached the door, it slammed shut, trapping Tommy inside. "Tommy!" I shouted, pounding on the door. But all I could hear was the sound of the house, chewing. I don't know how I got out. I don't know why it let me go. But when I turned around, the house was quiet again, standing as still and lifeless as before. Tommy and Ben, they were gone. No one believes me. They say the Cromwell house is just an old mansion. The kids run away. That the legend isn't real. But every year, it still gets what it wants. I've never told anyone this story before. It's too dark, too messed up. But after what happened last Halloween, I feel like I have to. Maybe as a warning, or maybe just to get it out of my head. It all started when my little brother Ethan found this old beat-up Halloween mask at a thrift shop. He was always into weird, creepy stuff, but this mask was different. It looked ancient, with cracks all over it, like it had been buried for years. The face it formed was twisted, almost like someone had been screaming when the mask was molded. It gave me chills the moment I saw it, but Ethan was obsessed. We were shopping for costumes. It was a few days before Halloween, and Ethan didn't have anything picked out. Mom told him to just grab something simple, but Ethan was never simple. He wanted something unique, something no one else would have. And when he saw that mask, it was like he was drawn to it. I tried to talk him out of it, but he wasn't hearing it. He bought it for just a couple of dollars. The shop owner gave him a strange look as he handed over the cash. I wish I had noticed that look more. The first time Ethan put the mask on, I was in the next room, and I remember hearing him laugh. Only, it wasn't his normal laugh. It was deeper, almost like someone was laughing through him. When I walked in to check on him, he was standing in front of the mirror, just staring at himself. The mask looked even more twisted on his face, like it had come to life. I remember asking him if he was okay, and he just turned and grinned at me. But something in his eyes had changed. They were darker. His usual bright, playful eyes had a coldness to them. I told him to take that stupid mask off, and he said okay, and he tried, or at least I think he did. He grabbed the edges of the mask, pulling at it, but it wouldn't budge. It was like it was glued to his skin. He kept yanking harder and harder until his face started turning red from the effort. "I can't get it off," he said as he kind of seemed like he was starting to panic a little bit. We tried everything: soap, water, even scissors to cut the edges, but it was like the mask had become a part of him. I could see the panic in his eyes, but every time he tried to freak out, something changed. It was like the mask calmed him down, but not in a good way, more like it controlled him. "Maybe it will come off on its own," I said, trying to sound a little hopeful. But I didn't believe that, and I don't think Ethan did either. Over the next few days, Ethan started acting strange. It wasn't just the mask anymore, it was him. He was quieter, colder. He stopped talking to me and Mom. His usual goofy self was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. He'd sit in his room for hours, staring at the wall, wearing that mask like it was his real face. And then the nightmares started. I remember waking up in the middle of the night feeling like something was watching me. I'd see shadows moving in the corners of my room, hear whispers that didn't belong to anyone. One night I woke up and found Ethan standing at the foot of my bed, just staring at me through the mask. I jumped out of bed, my heart racing, but he didn't move. He just stood there, breathing heavily. "Ethan, what the hell are you doing?" He didn't answer. He just turned and walked out of my room, his footsteps slow and deliberate. I followed him down the hallway, calling out to him, but he wouldn't stop. He went outside into the backyard, and when I finally caught up with him, he was just standing by the old oak tree, just staring up at it. "It's almost time," he whispered, but I could barely hear his voice through the mask. "Time for what?" I asked, but he didn't answer. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face, or rather the mask's face. That twisted, screaming expression was burned into my mind. I knew something was horribly wrong, but I didn't know what to do. I told Mom the next day, but she just brushed it off, saying Ethan was probably just going through a phase. But I knew better. This wasn't a phase, this was something far worse. Halloween night came, and Ethan still hadn't taken the mask off. He hadn't even tried anymore. It was like he'd accepted it, like he was happy with it. He didn't even dress up in a costume. He just wore the mask, sitting on the front porch as kids came and went trick-or-treating. He didn't speak, didn't move. He just watched. Around 9 p.m., after most of the kids had gone home, I went outside to check on him. The air felt different that night, heavier, like something bad was about to happen. I walked up to Ethan, calling his name softly, but he didn't respond. I reached out to touch his shoulder, and that's when he finally moved. His head snapped towards me, his eyes behind the mask glowing, like they were actually glowing, a greenish color. "Ethan, what's going on?" I asked, backing away, my heart starting to pound in my chest. He stood up slowly, and as he did, I noticed something terrifying. The mask. It wasn't just stuck to him anymore. It had become part of his skin. The edges had blended in with his face, the cracks from the mask now spreading across his cheeks and forehead like veins. He wasn't just wearing it, he was becoming it. "I can't stop it," he whispered, his voice barely recognizable. It was deeper now, like something else was speaking through him. "It wants more." Before I could ask him what he meant, Ethan took off running into the woods behind our house. I chased after him, screaming his name, but he didn't stop. He was running faster than I'd ever seen him move before, darting between the trees like an animal. My legs burned as I ran, but I couldn't lose him. Not now. I finally caught up with him at the edge of a clearing, where he was standing in the middle, facing the moon. His arms were raised, and the air around him was thick with a strange, buzzing energy. I could feel it vibrating in my bones, making my teeth ache. The mask. It was glowing now, pulsing with a sick green light that made the shadows around us twist and move like they were alive. "Ethan, please, take the mask off." But he didn't respond. His head snapped back, his body convulsing as the light from the mask grew brighter. I could hear whispers all around me, voices that didn't belong to anyone, voices that seemed to come from the mask itself. They were chanting something in a language I didn't understand, something dark and ancient. Suddenly, Ethan let out a scream, a blood-curdling scream, inhuman sound that echoed through the trees. His body twisted and contorted, and I watched in horror as his skin started to change. It was like the mask was spreading, covering his entire body, turning him into something else, something monstrous. His hands grew claws, his body hunched over, and his eyes, those glowing green eyes, were no longer my brother's. They were something else entirely, something evil. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. My legs were frozen in place. My mind was screaming at me to move, but I was paralyzed with this fear. And then he looked at me. "Join me," his voice sounding twisted and deep. I shook my head, backing away slowly. "Ethan, please don't do this." But it wasn't Ethan anymore. The thing that had once been my brother lunged at me, its claws slashing through the air. I barely had time to react, diving out of the way just in time. I hit the ground hard, my breath knocked out of me, but I forced myself to get up and run. I don't know how I made it back to the house, but I did. I slammed the door shut behind me, locking it, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear him, or it, outside, pacing around, scratching at the windows, whispering my name in that twisted, guttural voice. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. When the sun finally came up, the noises stopped. I went outside hoping, praying, that Ethan would be there, that he would be okay. But he was gone. All I found were the claw marks in the dirt and the faint smell of something burning. It's been almost a year now. Halloween is coming up, and I still haven't seen him. But I have a bad feeling that I will this Halloween. I just hope everything's gonna be okay. I see you've survived this far, but remember, not every story is just a tale. Some are waiting to find you. If you enjoyed tonight's descent into terror, hit that subscribe button and join our growing nightmare. And if you're brave enough, share your own ghostly experiences in the comments below. Until next time, keep the lights on and stay out of the shadows, because here at Midnight Delight, the darkness is always hungry.